Hey, ladies, the phone's ringing. The doctor is in. We're not sure where Mo is, but I'm sure she'll be here. But I have two amazing, amazing, badass advocates here with me today. And we are going to talk about the real cost of care, like the stuff that's sort of hidden under the rug. It's our continuation of National Minority Health Month. That's April. We get another month of the year, which is pretty good, right? To talk about all the disparities that exist in the world that are now coming to the table. But I have these amazing women, and there's so many things. You go to the doctor, you get diagnosed, you have the C thing, the C word, you get cancer. They say, here's your treatment plan, but they don't tell you about all the other stuff that's going to affect your body, the after effects. So we're going to talk about the spiritual cost of cancer, the emotional cost, the mental health cost. Well, I guess that's emotional cost. The after effects. Oh, here she comes. All of the bad things that can happen to you, and it's not even about money. It's about all these other things that can happen to you. Hey, Mo's coming on. So while Mo's getting together, introduce yourselves, you guys. Hey, Mo. Tammy.
Yes.
Who are you? Say who you are. My brushing Tammy.
I'm looking at Dr. Mo like, hey, Dr. Mo.
Hey, Dr.
How
Mo.
you doing? Oh my goodness, it's so good to see all your faces. Look at all these gorgeous smiles.
Look at, yes.
Woo!
Look at you.
Yeah.
Do you want to take over? You want me to introduce myself?
Keep going. Take a deep breath, Mo.
Okay.
We're good. Take a deep breath. Everybody take a deep breath.
Right.
So we're just introducing Tammy. We're talking about the real cost of care, emotional, physical, financial. That's stuff you can think about, like naturopathy, like all the stuff that could bother you, all the things that can affect you besides just going to the doctor and getting the chemo and the surgery, right? So
it's so much more to it, and I wish the medical community understood that. I don't mean to cut you off, and we're going to get to introductions, but it's so important to have shows like this because of when people hear the word cancer, patients understand all this immediately because their thoughts are, what about my family? What about my mother? What about the kids? What about the, vacation I had planned? What about the bills? What about next month's rent? Like not even years out, but the doctor's focused on this tumor, this biology, this surgery. And it's important to bring that element into the conversation early so that you can begin to paint a picture of how life is going to be overall. Because what good is it offering the latest cutting edge stuff if you can't afford it, right? If you got to choose between your mortgage and your chemo, come on, right? You get an important, you get chemo and you live on the street. I mean, we know how this goes. If you're in a shelter, like what are you supposed to do?
Right. And then also the stuff that comes later. Neuropathy, lymphedema, just even dealing with the emotional stuff, the emotional issues of your kids. Like Kaylee had a meltdown 3 years later after my treatment because she packed it in. So dealing with your kids, dealing with everybody in your family, and then the crazy people come out. So, and how do you deal with that?
Mean? Which one?
All the crazy people. No, all the people in your family, like, well, what's wrong? Are you okay? That drive you crazy because you can't, you don't want to talk about it anymore. But all the issues about just dealing with the cancer, and even if you want to, take a yoga class, it costs more. If you want to go to a naturopath, it's not covered by insurance. Like all the things that could be involved in. So it's a huge equation. Everything's on the table. So.
We have think after the surgery, you're supposed to get back to normal, and like what's wrong? Why are you still sad? Why are you depressed? Why are you complaining? Or why don't you have that energy level anymore? And I hear a lot of patients say that their family just doesn't understand.
They don't get it. And also the role that you played in the family may change. Like, because if you were the head of the family and the breadwinner and the whatever, and now you don't want to be that anymore. Right. And how do you pull away from that? Which I have a great story about that. So we have these like amazing women. I love these women so much. I know. Dr. Tammy, Reverend Tammy.
Well, hello there. The doctor is in, family and friends. It's me. It's such an honor to be back in this space with you amazing women again. I mean, I know we keep saying that, but y'all, for real, it is true love in the fam. It's not just for you. We
That's
really
right.
do love and admire and respect one another and the work that we are doing in this space. I am a 17-year breast cancer survivor. Woo-hoo! Yes, they told me I was I wouldn't make it to 5. And so I'm 17, 12 plus on the other side of 5. I am the co-founder of Carrie's Touch, an organization whose sole focus is to reverse the high mortality rates, disparity between Black and white women diagnosed with breast cancer. I'm the co-founder of Project SOAR, Speaking Our African American Realities, a research project in partnership with UCLA, and I got a piece of hair in my eye, with UCLA. And I am a participant in, well, I was a participant in a clinical trial. And I say that because we'll get into all of that stuff later on in this conversation. And most importantly, I'm a child of God, and I'm glad to be here.
So glad you're here. So glad you're here. So good to see you. So good to see you. And my precious friend Z. We got the California's covered today. We got Oakland and Sacramento and
In the house.
in the house.
California connection.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hey, Z, reaching across the world to get to you, Z.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I share the honor in being here along with Reverend Tammy. This platform is such a blessing, and not only to the audience, but to the participants. I've been fortunate enough where I've walked away feeling a lot more introspective and being put in greater touch, not only with the challenges of the patients, but the challenges of providers, you know, because oftentimes we're dealing with the same traumas and we have a lot of the same reaction. And this is a platform in which the two come together. And I actually feel like it creates community, because we're coming here with a shared purpose, a shared interest and shared pain. So we can better position ourselves to find shared solutions. So that's an awesome blessing. I am a child of God. I'm practicing. I'm not a perfect one, honey, if you've heard a couple of these broadcasts, but I'm trying, getting better at it. And I am a breast cancer navigator at a Safety Net Integrated Hospital in Oakland, California. I also belong to fantastic community groups such as Umoja Health, United in Health, put together by the incredible Dr. Kim Rhodes. I'm also a part of the Wisdom Leadership Board, put together by the incredible Dr. Laura Esserman. And I'm blessed. I work with the Public Health Commission, so I do a lot of things within the community. I'm also part of a newly formed, about a year, formed Cancer Collaborative that's a part of a Healthy Net, Safety Net Integrated Hospital System, Alameda Health System. And the journey of the patients is really what we're centering, the Black patients. It's a Black grant. We have Black voices, and we're not serving, we're designing the menu, meaning the priorities will be based.
All right.
Within the community needs. It's a challenge, but it's one that I would be remiss if I didn't
I love that.
thank the collaborative members for being brave enough and bold enough to take upon that challenge. I don't know what the success will be, but I know we're ready and we're taking upon those challenges. So I'm gonna shout them out and
We're ready.
put to the work.
I love it. I love it.
Let me ask you this, Lee. What are some of the challenges that the grant seeks to address?
Well, it's a grant, ACS Pfizer grant, and it's related to screening disparities and breast, gynecologic, and colorectal. But it's centered on addressing racism, structural, organizational, and programmatic racism within our healthcare system. So that's very interesting, because usually, you know, we examine somebody else and we rarely take time to examine our own self and address our own shortcomings. So this is a unique opportunity, and we just trying to bring it to the best of our ability to make sure that everybody walks away made whole and that everybody walks away with something that is beyond equitable. Equitable is just like whatever. Is it empowering?
Right.
Is it enlightening?
Ooh, wee, I love
Does it
that.
elevate? You know what I'm saying?
And is
So
it
that's where we're
transformative?
trying to take it. And,
Right?
and, you know,
Yeah, I love that. You
Yeah.
gotta be able to transform
Yeah.
for you can't expect your health system, you can't expect your patients to have a transformative experience if your providers, if your workers, if your staff haven't had that same eye opening.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
And sometimes you have to start there. You know, the patients are already being transformed, right?
Right. You know, the first time I met Z, we actually serve on this committee together, a patient advisory board for Blue Note Therapeutics. It's an app. It's this great mental health app that is now an FDA approval. But she said that I remember this so pointedly, Z, that you said, you know, when the patients come to you, breast cancer is about the fourth or fifth thing on the list, right? The patient walks in and you got to make sure they have a place to live, they got food to eat, that their kids are taken care of, that, you know, that they're mentally ready for dealing with what they have to deal with. And then you can get to, okay, your chemo plan is XYZ, because there's so many things that are affecting our women. So, you know, they get that breast cancer diagnosis, it's on top of like their life. It may not be going so great to begin with, right?
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that, Ricky, that had a couple of things. When we began Carrie's Touch, you know, 15 years ago, it came out of an empirical study that I was doing to try to raise awareness, you know, in where everybody runs to, the churches. And that was exactly my experience with the women that were there. I couldn't talk about breast cancer because they were just trying to get to the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of need,
Right.
just their basic needs,
Right.
you know, food, shelter,
Right.
childcare, things like
Right.
that. And then when women were diagnosed, they literally used the words, I can't afford
Answer.
deal with breast cancer. So if we're talking about the cost of care and you're talking about these women, many of them, you know, statistically, we know that at least in California, you know, 78% of Black households, women are the head of household,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
They are the primary breadwinners. They're the ones that's keeping the family together.
Right.
And you talk about taking them out of that situation to undergo chemotherapy on medical leave, which is a portion of an income that already isn't enough. Then women say things like, I can't afford to undergo treatment for cancer, right? And then part two of what I want to say is, you know, we've always had survivor support for direct services for patients. But since COVID, we developed a fund called Rapid Response. But let me tell you, the number one request in 2020 was housing. There were so many homeless women undergoing treatment for chemotherapy. I mean, treatment for breast cancer and doing chemotherapy out of a hotel, out of a motel. We currently have a 71-year-old woman who can't even start her treatment because she lives in her car.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that unfortunately.
There, you know, we have collaborated with 3 other agencies just trying to get this woman some housing. You know, her husband died. She found herself homeless. She's diagnosed with breast cancer. She's living in her car. She's used to a certain standard of living. And then what she's bringing in on her own without her husband, she's not used to that lifestyle. So she's turning down housing because it matches her budget, but it's not what she's used to. And she can't. Imagine imagine the psychological cost that she's experiencing right now. And our number one request in 2022 is not just housing, but it's gas.
Sure, they can't get to the hospital. They can't get to chemo. They can't get to treatment.
Yeah, you know, we just put together a whole transportation grant program at our hospital because what good is radiation if you can't make it to all the treatments?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I have a different take a little bit on what we're navigating. I've always said I don't navigate cancer, I navigate life. And everything I don't attribute to cancer. I attribute it to greed. I attribute it to scarcity models. I attribute it to lack of resourcing. I attribute it to who's designing the programs and who's designing the interventions. So I think that sometimes we have to kind of deconstruct what is actually going on so we can assign the
Mhm.
responsibility to the correct people, because it's not all cancer.
Oh,
You know, it's meaning
Yeah.
like if you have a situation in which there has been no investment and development that speaks to the least of thee, okay, where everything costs you $80,000 and you get a porch light and maybe a balcony rail,
mhm.
but you're looking at the wages and they can't afford either one, okay, that's not attributable to cancer. That's attributable to greed and not investing in housing. If you look at transportation justice and you're developing all these new rail lines and what have you, but they're not coming into the browner and black neighborhoods, that's not attributable to cancer.
Right.
So I look at things that way and say, wait a minute. Now, what is cancer related? And what are the other structures, you know, because it's all interconnectedness, you know, and when you look at the safety net and you start tugging at it strand by strand, you're going, wait a minute, this
Right.
is not a net, this is a trap.
Right.
Because nobody is progressing,
Yeah.
nobody is being taken care of. There's inadequacies all through that net. And the net got a giant hole in it. I'm like, honey, that's a basketball net with the size of that hole. Nobody is safe in that.
Mhm.
So then the journey is, how can we reweave that net? So then you go to the agencies or the investors that develop housing and you start advocating on behalf of the patient to say, this is what we really need. Because we have patients that aren't able to be healed. They're being denied healing because they can't be housed.
They don't have a place to live.
You know, the moral imperative, I always go back to that because so much of what I believe our patients suffer are issues that are surrounded by morality as opposed to just the side effects of cancer. And I don't mean to say just the side effects, because of course that's front and center physically, but the ways in which they suffer, oftentimes they're impactful, but they're not a direct result of the cancer.
Mhm. It's the disease they had before they got cancer.
Yeah, it's our disease. It's a societal disease,
Right. Right.
you know, and our patients are being impacted most adversely because
Right.
you know, we got models now where it's supposed care models, but they're really new models for billing. Okay. And now what's
Now,
becoming
that's the truth.
more prominent
Call a
is
thing
that,
a thing. Call
You-
a thing
you know,
a thing.
it is what it is. It's billing over burdens.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let me ask you this though, how do you separate the salt from the stew though? Because by the time these patients reach us, they're already in extremis in their lives, right? And now they're in
Right.
extremis in their health. And
Right.
whose responsibility is it? And how do you manage all of that at point of care? And that I think is the challenge for most, you know, most community cancer programs, is that these patients didn't have stable housing, they didn't have stable income, they didn't, you know, there were so many instabilities, and it's not dissimilar to education, right? Our students go to school and they have housing insecurity, food insecurity, they have, you know, issues at home, and the teacher ends up being and doing everything. Well, so does the cancer program. So where do we begin to address these things?
For me, Dr. Mo, and thank you, Z, for the work that you do and the role that you play helping to navigate systemic racism on behalf of patients. Because, you know, if we're going to call a thing, we're looking at systemic racism and use. I'm going to get in trouble here, but you know,
Okay.
No,
You
put
can't
it
get
all
in
out
trouble
there.
on our show.
This is a safe space.
I know, you can't get in trouble here.
but they use terms like, and Ricky, you will attest that I've always had a problem with social determinants of health.
I hate that word. I hate those.
People throw that around, and yes, there is a place for social determinants of health where it can inform us. But when you look at Black people, and we're talking about all of the have-nots that Black folks are experiencing at the point of diagnosis, Social determinants of health are just another way to A, blame the patient
Exactly.
getting cancer, B, covering up systemic racism, and C,
Oh my God.
not addressing the real issues that need to be addressing that we're talking about here on this show. And so I think the first step that we do is that we've got to collaborate, because no one agency
Right.
can do it all, right?
Right.
But
Right.
when I say, okay, well, Carrie's Touch is doing this, and then we go, oh, well, you know, Black Breast Cancer Alliance does this, and then forgive me for not remembering the name, but you know, the programs that you're with can do this. And then we've got to be able to replicate these programs across the nation, you know.
Right. And scale them. Right.
Got to scale. But we first of all have got to get enough money to do it.
Right.
Can
Exactly.
we define for people watching, what do you mean by social determinants of health? What is the definition for you?
Yeah. So, you know, I got a beautiful definition because we have reconstructed it, but I don't have it memorized yet. So I'm gonna get back to you on it. But just in a nutshell, social determinants of health are looking at you know, your socioeconomic status, it's looking at environment, it's looking at education, and it's all of those things that help inform possible ways around health
Right.
disparities, right? But it doesn't end there. The whole social determinants of health have to include solutions to address these issues or determinants, as they call them, to help the people, A, be able to get out of the situation. So Bobo is in the projects, has been in the projects all his life with no access to anything beyond his 6 blocks. So he doesn't even know what's available to him.
Right.
Right. So giving Bobo an expanded vision of life and a world that's bigger than his 6 blocks, that provides resources that helps him get to wherever it is that he is trying to go to.
But
Right.
the thing is, they're looking at the same thing they've always been looking at, whether
Yes,
it's
they
redlining.
are. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
Right.
and the social determinants of health, to me, what that does is it just defines your existence. It doesn't speak to the origin of that existence. And that's half the problem, because that takes you back into a lot of
Come
practices
on.
that we see across the United States.
Mhm.
Redlining. Everybody cannot, why is it that when we look at our neighborhoods that are blackest and brownest, they're poorest? Okay, Oakland, yeah, we got it going on, but honey, we don't influence the politics in Detroit.
That's
Right.
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 So there's something that's going on that's much larger.
It's by
So,
design.
the-
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's by
So
design.
when I think about how to collaborating with poor, you collaborating with poor and you're gonna stay poor.
Right.
Okay, so that speaks to the scarcity and the lack of resourcing. So then what do we do to challenge, to transform? I think that we have to learn how to fight asymmetrically.
Yeah.
You know, we can
Tell
have
me
a group
more.
over here that's taking on the more institutionalized challenges that speak to more of the structural design, you know, that frames the inequities. We can have another group that speaks to how to really empower and uplift our community, how to advise philanthropic investment in our communities. You know, we have to understand what we're collaborating around. You know, because what happens is a lot of times we bring in a scarcity model in terms of funding. You got 5,000 Black groups competing for $1.
For $1.
Okay.
$1.
And that does not work. That does not foster collaboration. That fosters
Not at all.
competition. Okay. So now we got all that going on. You know, then we get programs that are so balkanized. You got one group over here, oh, I'm gonna help you fill out this form. Then you got 3 groups over there fighting over what the other form they're gonna help you fight or fill out, because that's what $1 is. I mean, I think we really have to be intentional in naming what the challenges are, because a lot of times I find that we adopt the language that doesn't speak to what it is that we're undergoing. And then we are spinning our wheels to seek a solution where our problems aren't even really articulated.
Right.
So that's the approach. I try to look at it on the various levels that it presents itself and find out where is the power and the force and the subject matter expertise and the passion that can take on all these things? Because we might be taking on a subject, but we have to continue to expand and take on structures, because that's the biggest
That's the
barrier
barrier, right?
to so much of what we undergo.
Yeah.
That's right. The
And-
structure determines the function or lack thereof. What's
Right,
not
right,
functioning
right.
well, it's like anatomy, you know, we learn the
Mhm.
structure determines the function. How that muscle attaches, where it's located helps
Right.
you to know what it does, right? And
Right.
when our structures are not performing properly, then guess what happens in our healthcare system? The care falls apart.
The part.
It falls apart. So
Mhm.
walk a patient through.
Yeah.
Like let's take, for example, you know, we've got a 47-year-old woman who comes to see you. She's got stage 2 triple negative breast cancer. You know, she lives in an apartment and she's, you know, working one job, thinking about picking up another job at nights, but having trouble getting her help, you know, getting childcare, et cetera. How does she begin to wrap her mind around all of this without the burden of all of this? Or does she?
Yeah, so let me, if I may jump in on that one really quickly, Dr. Mo, to piggyback what Z just outlined. I think we're talking about, unfortunately, two different sides of the same coin in that same patient, right?
Mhm.
He is talking about attacking a structure, right, that is systematically built on white supremacist policies, right, that don't consider us. They never considered us. That's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is the woman that you just described. And for me, the woman that you just described, her role at point of diagnosis is not to deal with the system, tearing down the system. Her
Yeah.
role at point of diagnosis is to survive.
Is to get better.
To survive, because the
Need you to
statistics
say
are
that
not-
again, that message again, because people watching thinking about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And they're not recognizing when they say, no, I can't get treatment because I can't afford, no, I can't think about these things because they got to focus on their healing.
On their
They
healing,
have to
on their
focus on
disease.
their healing, and they got to
Mhm.
leave. I mean, Z is a soldier. You hear her, you see her,
Yeah.
you feel her passion. Let her fight for you
Mhm.
until you can get to a point that you are physically well, mentally
Emotionally well.
emotionally well, financially well, spiritually well, and your family is back intact. And then you go put on your gear
Right,
and go fight with Z, right?
Right.
That takes, I tell people all the time, cancer, year one is a physical battle. Year two is a mental, spiritual, and emotional battle, because it hits you and you're in a whirlwind. You all of a sudden are dropped in the middle of Greece and you don't speak Greek.
right,
You
right.
learn a few key words to semi-understand what your doctor is gonna take you
Right.
through.
Right,
You're trying to navigate children. You know, I don't have to do the woman that you described, Mo. I was 39. I had an 11 and a 12-year-old at home. I was a single mom. These boys were in activities. They had
Right.
full-on lives. They
Right.
did not have to, they didn't have the capacity to understand their mama moaning in the other room and acknowledging that the pain from the chemotherapy drugs were causing my bones to hurt. I didn't understand it, right? All those little boys wanted to know when they looked in my eyes was, Mama, are you going to be okay?
and
what
one
is
of those little boys is about to graduate from medical school. Hello.
He is, yeah, y'all, we got an anesthesiologist in the fam, so he can come work with you, Dr. Mo. He can come work with you. Get your,
Yes, he can. Come on, baby. That's right.
you know what? But that is not without trauma. You know, it's not my place to tell his story, but his path wasn't a traditional path. And it started with the trauma of having to get his mama off the toilet because I could not physically get up myself. And my caregiver had run an errand, but I had to go to the bathroom and I thought I could do it
Right.
on my own, from my bed to the bathroom. I thought I could do it and I couldn't.
Wow.
So I think we're talking about two different lanes.
Life,
I don't-
real life.
yeah,
We're talking about
yeah.
real life. We're talking
You know,
about real life.
confused about advocacy work and healing
Right.
being in two separate spaces.
And they are, but they're interconnected. And the reason why I say that is that was my journey. When I started this work in 2012, that was the primary focus, was to make sure that the patients survived with as much love and comfort and resourcing as possible. But as over time, the disinvestment in that resourcing began to occur. And it got harder and harder to resource and support the patients. And you're looking all over the place. You're trying to take care of your patient. You know, you've taken on the responsibility of helping them. And then there's really no help. And you don't want to go back and tell the patient, well, really not that much out here. Let me, and create that other level of anxiety. And that's really what led me down the pathway of looking at structures and institutions and resourcing, because of the direct and adverse impact that it was having on the patient populace.
Right.
Because if I'm not in a position to help the patient, then why am I there?
Right.
And if the resources aren't as plentiful as they used to be, then before I can help the patient, I gotta get something to help them with.
Right.
Right.
So it's that interconnectivity, you know, that I found myself in, especially when you dealing with a patient populace that is primarily Black and Brown. We
Right.
are subject to so many different
Right.
funding streams, and everything is dependent on this and that, and you lose one, you know, that's nothing small.
Right.
So
When you miss it, you need
yeah,
it. But I think
Yeah.
also, Z, that you have been able to really look at the needs of these patients, because you're hearing them, you're seeing them, you're touching them, you're feeling what they feel, so that you can go represent them to these structures that need to respond to them and all that they need. So, you know, I think one of your biggest strengths is saying, okay, here's what the situation is with these women. This is what they need, because you're hearing it, you're living it with them every day. When they come to you, like, you see what's going on. So you can then say, okay, these are the structures that we need to change or make happen or whatever to get these women what they need, or these people what they need, these patients what they need. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
But it's a balancing act of listening and learning and understanding, and then knowing how to go, who to go to say, wait a minute, hold up, I need some apartments, I need some housing, I need some whatever, I need some food, whatever, to get with these people what they need.
and despite all my cynicism, oftentimes there are actually people and organizations that will help. You'd be amazed at what people know and what they don't know, and the general understanding that they have about cancer. And then when you start really breaking it down, oftentimes the response is empathetic, it's warm, and it's how can I help? But we have got to be more emboldened to talk about the systems,
Yes.
because that's where they go, what? You mean they don't get this? They don't get that?
No, they don't.
And that can be your calling card to a certain extent, and trying to represent that patient, you know, when you have those opportunities to make people aware of what it's really like, what's really going on in the life of a cancer patient.
Yeah, and Tammy, I don't know if you see it, what I see too. When I rattle off the stats of Black breast cancer, you know, all the numbers, all the mortality rate numbers, all the numbers, people are still astounded by that data.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe because we live it every day, that guess what? Black women under 35 get breast cancer at twice the rate and die at 3 times rate, well before they're 40 for a mammogram. Like, all these numbers are just, you know, we have a 50% high rate of all these things that are so real to us are still a surprise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many people that are in this, you know, that have a role in our lives, whether it's housing, pharmaceutical companies, whatever, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, that's why we have to keep advocating and educating, but it still boggles my mind that this isn't front and center for the world to know that these are what we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah, Ricky. I mean, it, and when you hit them with all the stats and the numbers, and then I turn around and say, and guess what? Nothing has changed for Black women in more than 20 years.
For years.
more. I'm 17, and those were the stats I heard when I was newly diagnosed. My mother in ministry is 20. Those were the stats that she heard when she was newly diagnosed. And so I get to say, in a minimum of 20 years, nothing has changed with all of the advancements in breast cancer. I know for a fact, participating in a clinical trial, I've seen the movement
Right,
of
Right.
medicine,
right.
right? But the numbers for Black women are still disgracefully
Mhm.
drastically different when it comes to survivorship of this disease. And that's why for me in this conversation, I agree and say we have to connect with the work that people like Z are doing as advocates in the space. But when you're the patient, you got to be patient, because part of the reason is because for us, we have been taught to care for other people before we
Yes.
do for
Come
ourselves,
on.
right?
Come on.
It's our being. It's who we are.
Exactly. And I say we're breaking the superwoman syndrome of trying to be all things to all people all the time perfectly while
Right.
suffering alone in silence.
Yep.
Right.
Hey, now you preaching, Reverend Tammy. Come on.
Right. But so I say that we have to prioritize self. When we get that diagnosis, everybody else, our children included, they got to go to the side if we want to be able to look our kids in the eyes. And when they say, are you going to be okay? We can believe it in our souls to be able to say, yes, I'm going to be okay. But what we don't know, because we know what we're dealing with that nobody else knows about, why are we going through breast cancer journeys alone? We're just talking about right now the women that are actually saying, I need help, or I need to call agencies, right? We've not even addressed the number of women who don't tell a soul.
Don't tell anybody. Who don't tell anybody.
Let's talk about the psychology behind that, because I think we have a chance to set some folks free here today. And it certainly is an individual opinion and perspective. And I get it. It's your prerogative not to share. But for the people who are going through this alone and wishing and wanting and trying to figure out how to navigate that space to tell their family and loved ones, give some advice.
So let me say this as an ordained clergywoman. There are a lot of women in the church who will pray and not claim the diagnosis and believe God for their healing and never do anything about it. Sis, I'm here to tell you right now that God is a healer. So I know for a fact, when I had that mentality, I stood in the pulpit with all the elders, their hands on my head, on my chest, on my back, on my arms, on my legs, on my knees, on my ankles, on my feet, under my feet. And I physically felt God heal my body. And I heard God say, daughter, you are healed. But my second opinion still said I had breast cancer. And then God said, little Black girl, you better carry your butt to that doctor, get that surgery, go through radiation, take that chemotherapy, get the,
do the work.
He sent you the people to heal you, to do the healing, right?
Exactly.
Faith without works is dead.
Well,
That's right.
And God still performs miracles. I see them every day.
Yes, I'm right here.
God's going to heal you miraculously, right? And so then let's talk about the folks that don't believe in the God that I believe in, right? Dr. Mo, you can confirm or deny this. I don't know of a non-medical way to cure cancer. So with that, I tell people, you get to choose whether you want to go the naturopathic way or not. It's your body, it's your choice. But you got to get the cancer out. If you don't get the cancer out, it's going to keep growing, it's going to keep moving.
Right.
And depending on what stage you're diagnosed in and how fat, the grade and all of those medical things that come along with this diagnosis, if you don't know those things, then you potentially could be putting yourself in harm's way You know, and we serve patients all the time that work Western medicine and naturopathic medicine in tandem to
With,
heal
with,
the
with
patient.
chemo.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be either or.
It
No,
doesn't
it
have
has
to
to
All
be
things
or.
work together, right?
integrated. All
Yeah.
things work together for good, and you need all of it.
And you know, and as a preacher, I try to be careful in how I insert God, because everybody doesn't believe the way that I believe. And I don't want them to think that they're left on the table, because they're
Right.
not. They
Right.
deserve healing too. And they get to pray to their God the way that they pray
Right,
and
Right.
still be healed.
right, right.
Well, I'm always hesitant to speak to this because by God's grace, I am not a breast cancer patient or survivor. But I am a woman of faith. I believe God and I trust him totally. I try to support my patients in whatever journey it is that they take, because that doesn't preclude me from praying for them.
Mhm.
Right,
You know,
right.
and I you know, I have some patients
Exactly.
of a certain faith that I'll give them prayer cloths,
Mm-hmm.
and they will use those prayer cloths and do different things, and others I'll just support them in their faith, you
Mhm.
know, and a lot of it too is fear.
Mhm.
And some people,
Fear.
they come in and their faith has already been challenged in life.
Yep.
And they're broken, you know, you have
Yeah.
broken spirits, broken hearts, broken families. A
Mhm.
lot of times we're dealing with a spirit of brokenness.
Right,
And so we're asking them to trust in a healing that they have yet to receive.
Right.
So that's another layer. So
yeah,
you just take it step by step, and and try to accompany them on their journey. I always tell my patients, I'm not the pilot.
Mhm.
I'm the co-pilot. You know, tell me where you want to go. And
right,
if it looks like, you know, we're gonna head for some turbulence, or no,
Right.
this is, we got to use this gear, because otherwise this could be a crash landing, or whatever you feel like is an analogy for that. When you're in a position where you can accompany them on that journey,
Mhm.
and there's no judgment.
Right.
Mm,
Sometimes that's the best medicine,
Yeah.
you know, and for my role, because I don't try to speak to their journey. I feel it would be almost disrespectful for me to insert what I think should happen, and I've never had that experience. I just try to look at what I can present them to help them through that experience. And it's so much, and it can change on a dime. You can be having a conversation about one thing, and all of a sudden this emotion comes up.
right,
Mhm.
So, you know, it's just really just trying to see, for me, try to see beyond the cancer, and just look at who this woman is, who this family is. What are these trials? What are these fears? What are these responsibilities? Because from my perspective, oftentimes the treatment of cancer sometimes is the easiest thing to get. You're gonna
Right.
get your chemotherapy appointment. So you're gonna get your treatment plan, and you're gonna get referred to radiation. It's all the other stuff. And a lot of times looking at it through that cancer lens first, I learned early on, it was almost like not a disservice, but I was prioritizing based on what I understood and not what the patient was experiencing. So I
Mhm.
had to learn to fall back and allow them to direct me, and not take on trying to direct them. Just be there to accompany and assist best I can.
But that's what you do so well, because you do hear them. You do see through what
Yeah.
they're dealing with, you know, that's why you're so good at what you do, Z. I mean, that's, you know, that's your gift.
Yeah.
Because you can see them for what they really need and who they really are. And half the time, I mean, I think a lot of the time, we don't even know. Once you, you know, when you hear you've got breast cancer, stage 3 triple negative, it's like, wah, wah, you can't hear anything. And then you start thinking about all the things on your list as a mother, as a, you know, as a single mother, as a breadwinner, or whatever your role is, and everything about it is challenged.
Yep.
Everything about it is challenged. And then even like where you said you made it to 5 years, me too, you get to that 5-year mark, but it never goes away, Tammy.
Never goes
7
away.
years, it never goes away. I'm on 10, it never
It goes
goes
never-
away. It's there every day. And clearly it is the work that we do, but I know in the back of my head, you know, that, and I don't want to say I'm afraid of anything, but you know, I think my biggest fear is my daughters, my kids, you know? You know, is it gonna affect them? But it never goes away. And so what are there all the things that you're still dealing with, even 10 years out, 17 years out? The emotional trauma is still there, right? And guess what? The financial trauma is also still there, right? What did you sacrifice for the cost of care? Whether it was, you know, wasn't covered by insurance, or what other costs did you incur because you couldn't work for 2 years, or you couldn't, you know, you couldn't pay this bill, or you couldn't, you know, take care of your family. So it's a lifelong thing that you're dealing with here. So, and then
You know-
God forbid you get it back, you have a recurrence, which happens 39% higher time, you know, more times than white women. Then what do? You think you're out of it, and like, here it comes again. Right? So, gosh.
Yeah. And you know, Malcolm X said that Black women are the most disrespected, least protected, and most neglected humans in America. And he said that, you know, more than 50 years ago. And sadly, that, I mean, we saw with the confirmation hearings of
Right. God help her. God bless her.
right?
God bless her.
Judge, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. We saw that play out in front of our. So we've never been given permission to heal.
Yeah.
And so I think what's so beautiful for me in this conversation, and especially for people like Z, I'm gonna keep saying it, y'all, because my nurse navigator saved my life. And so
Oh, yeah.
no, she wasn't a Black woman, but she was a Z. She cared about my niece, and she cared about my life, and she cared about my livelihood. She was willing to sit in the thick of it with me and learn and teach me that it was okay for me to heal. And so I just want to say, Black women out there today, and Black men dealing with breast cancer, permission granted. You have permission to heal, right? So you go to the Z's of the world and you say, I don't know what I need.
Right. I just need
I
help.
just know I want to live.
Right.
That's
Let me
all you
ask you
gotta
this.
say, and we'll figure it out together.
Do Black and brown, do Black women and Black men know what healing looks like? Do we
No.
know? Do we know what it looks like, what it feels like? Well, can we talk about that? Because how do people get to a place that you've never been before?
Mhm. Yeah.
How do you get there?
That's why I used the word live. I want to live. I didn't know what it meant when I said, okay, I'm going to sign this paper for this daggone clinical trial with these 32 pages of possible side effects, because what you're telling me is that this cancer is an extremely fast growing cancer. It's already spread. It's got node involvement. I'm 39 years old, and the statistics say I'm not going to live 5 more years. I got a 10-year-old kid at home, an 11-year-old kid at home, and a 17-year-old kid that just left the house. I want to live. I don't know what that looks like, right? So just saying that we get permission to heal,
It's huge.
it's the journey. It's the journey. You know, my faith is of the Christian faith, and my first experience was the woman with the issue of blood. She touched the hem of Jesus' garment. Garment says, "Who touched?" Jesus said, "Who touched me?" She turned down and said, she didn't say she did. Jesus recognized that was her. Then the next thing that happens for me, Dr. Mo, to answer your question, is the most critical piece. It says that she knelt down and told him everything. She gave herself permission to just release all she had been carrying. And I'm not going to preach a sermon, but all that she had been carrying for 12 years, and nobody could help her.
Right.
She was on the margins, right?
Because she sounds like Resurrection Sunday to me. I don't know. It sounds like it might be the Easter sermon right here.
It's the Easter sermon.
But because she was bleeding, right? She was still on the margins. She was on the outcast. She could, anytime she even came into community, she had to scream unclean. Which did what? Social determinants of health swarming around, around her body, around her situation. And this woman had money initially, of course.
We're all bleeding. We're all bleeding.
But there's also
For all her.
the issue of self-love. And oftentimes we can't heal because we don't love ourselves, because we haven't been taught to love
Oh my gosh.
ourselves.
Oh
We
my
have been devalued and monetized in a system that does not recognize, respect, or receive us as ourselves. And then that can lead to a spirit of condemnation. See,
Right.
when you're dealing with a person that is already thinking that they are less than and they are unworthy, in the spiritual sense, that's a spirit of condemnation. And you got to remove that spirit of condemnation. And then you got to replace it with a spirit of love. And you
Right.
got to let patients know, regardless of your faith, that they are loved, and start holding up a mirror
Yep.
so they see the value in themselves, because sometimes that's what they need in order to fight. If you feel like you're not worthy, if you feel like you're not loved, if you come from a place of brokenness, if you come from a society in which you constantly rejected, you're never clean enough. We can't talk Black unless we clean it up so everybody else can understand, but they the ones that's trying to design something around the Black experience. Don't get me started,
Yeah.
okay?
I love it. I
But you
love
gotta
it.
let them
I love
know
it so much.
who
Sorry.
they are,
Sorry.
and that they are
Start
loved
something.
as they are. Because God, Jesus said, come to me as you are. If it's good enough for you to go to Jesus as you are, it's definitely good enough for you to come to me, honey, because I ain't all that. And so that's got to be part of our approach, even in our faith-based work, you know, to let people know you are
Yeah.
loved. It ain't my Jesus work, but my faith, it says for me to let people know you are loved, that you are cared for, that you are worthy.
Yep. So
And
let
help
me
them
ask
love
this
themselves.
question. I know we're rounding up, but I do want to ask this question because, of course, what about people that
I
are
love
mad
it.
at God? Right?
What
So
about
we
people-
say you got to know that God loves us, but what if you mad at God?
Mm.
What do we do with that group of folks?
Let them know it's all right.
You bring that too.
Exactly.
You know, if God
Exactly.
is omnipotent and omnipresent and all
Mhm.
these things, then God already knows how
Yep.
you feel about this,
Yep.
right?
Right.
God's waiting on us to acknowledge how we
Yeah,
feel, for us to
that's
get out of
right.
Yeah.
denial, waiting for
Mhm.
us to accept and then to envision something different for ourselves, right? We're
Yeah.
co-creators in this thing. That's part of our divine inheritance.
Yeah.
But you got to be honest about where you are. And I
Yeah.
find that so many of us are in denial. I'm fine. No, I'm okay. No, I don't need anything.
Mhm.
Nope, I feel fine today. No, you're not. You know, since you just came out of the bathroom, you just, no, you're not okay. When is
You're
it
not
okay to
okay.
be not okay for us? And how do we give ourselves permission? How do people get there? Because there's a lot of folks watching who are like, nope, I'm good. I'm fine. And they're doing all the things, but they don't know how to lay it down.
So if I finish that sermon, she told Jesus everything. And Jesus simply said, daughter, go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Your faith has made you well. Depending on your translation, your faith has made you whole. Your faith has healed you. The bottom line is her life, she gets a reset button
Mhm.
at that moment, and she gets to go co-create the life that she wants.
Yes.
Talk
love
about
that.
born
Yes.
again. There's
Yes.
another opportunity on the other side of this diagnosis, because you go through all the things. You
Right.
go through all of the
All the
emotions,
things.
all of the fears, you believe the statistics because that's what you're given.
Mhm.
And you have to figure it out that, you know what? I had my driver's license, and we Blockbuster time, we were going to rent a video,
Mhm.
and I put my driver's license on the counter and I looked at the driver's license and I said to my partner, I said, I want to be that girl again.
Mhm.
And I heard God clearly say, she no longer exists because she didn't have cancer.
Right.
And in that moment, that was my transformation. Daughter, be freed of your suffering. Go in peace. Your faith has made you whole. And that freed me to be able to recreate who I wanted to be.
Mhm.
Right. And so
I love this so much. I love this so much because that's why we do this work,
Yeah.
because we did make it to the other side,
Mhm.
and we aren't the same person. And when I talk to a new breastie, and the first thing is, you're going to be fine. You're going to be a new person on the other side of this. You are free to do whatever you want on the other side of this. Just do this work, and hold on to your faith, because look around you. That's why we're here, Tammy.
Mhm.
because we have a responsibility to show our breasty babies that they're badasses, they're gonna be badasses just like us, right? At some point. But it's so hard when you're in the moment, but that's why you need a Z. That's why you need a Mo to get you to over that hump.
Mhm.
But that's why we're here, so we can show you that you can do this. You can do hard things. You can get there, and then you can become your best self ever.
Well, we're going to remix this show, and we're going to remix it and invite some guests who are atheists and
Mhm.
agnostic,
Mhm.
because I
Mhm.
think that they need to be seen and feel
You haven't
seen,
heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and need to
Yes.
talk about where their healing and their hope comes from,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
provide a different perspective. So if you are watching, if you know family, friends, folks who are
Mm-hmm.
agnostic, don't believe in anything, who are atheists, who don't believe in God,
Let's do it.
we want to talk to them too.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
we do have a very sort of Christianity centric show, which is, it's good, is what we believe, but
Right.
there's room, as Reverend Tammy said, there's room for healing for everybody.
Everybody.
Right, and we want folks to be seen who are not necessarily
Yeah.
Christian.
Mhm.
Yep, Wiccans. We want to invite our Muslim brothers and sisters to come and
Right.
talk about their cancer journey, because you know how hard is it to heal when you don't even
Right.
get undressed in front of somebody, when you say you have chest
Yes.
pain and not breast pain, right? When you
Mhm.
don't even
Right.
talk about what's going on underneath your burqa, your sari, your hijab. You know, like we got to get there with it. So we
Yeah,
want
let's
to
do it.
widen this conversation for sure.
So
We'll do
Mo,
that.
Dr. Mo, I just have to go back to one thing. When you asked
Yeah.
about what if you're mad at God? I don't want to cry. In this work, I have been mad so many times
Mm.
at God, at just a whole bunch of people, because I see people experience stuff that I feel personally is unnecessary.
Mhm.
But you know what? He loved me anyway.
Mhm.
And he loved me through my anger. And that's what I would tell a person. If you're mad at God, he understand. But guess what? He loved you anyway. And all you got to do is tell him. You ain't got to write no novena. You don't have to repent for 500 hours. You can just say, you know what, God, I'm mad. You tell him why, and I guarantee you, he will talk to you, regardless whether you know him or not.
Right.
And that would be my advice. Tell him. And he'll talk back to you.
Say it.
I always say God ain't no punk and God is
Okay.
big enough.
Mm.
Whatever
Right.
it is, big enough.
So, yeah.
I know, one of my favorite scriptures is, is Proverbs 3:5-8. 3:5-7. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your understanding, he'll direct your path. Do not be impressed by your own wisdom.
Yep.
It's way bigger than us.
Way bigger.
It's way bigger than us.
Ooh.
Ooh, did we have church?
Yes, we did. We know it's Easter now.
And I'm about to
Look up
say,
that for a Holy Wednesday service.
Right, we have Bible study tonight, but I don't know, but Mo, you're right. We need to talk to everybody and give them a path. If this isn't your path, then we'll help you find your path. But there is a path. There is a path to the other side. And
and the resources for
find it.
folks who are non-believers, right? Non-Christian based resources, support groups and circles. We can do some research on those things
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
And
we'll
make
do
sure
that.
that we have some options for people, because I see more and more Black and brown support groups. I don't see a lot of Muslim support groups yet, and I don't see a lot of Hindu support groups yet. I don't see there's so much more, that there's folks who are suffering in silence in these
Mhm.
communities as well, because their communities, some of them think breast cancer is a curse.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
Can we need to talk about that with our African brothers and sisters,
Mhm.
thinking that, there's shame, and that there's something that maybe someone did and brought it on their house. They brought shame on their house, So I think we're gonna bust it up and get into this more in 2022, and it's gonna
Yes.
be good.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be good stuff. It's gonna be good stuff. Woo!
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
You
you.
guys are so awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank
Let's
you.
do a quick round robin of a message of hope for this, again, for
Yeah.
people who observe Easter and Passover, this Resurrection Sunday that's coming up, right? What is the message of resurrection for people who are watching, who are right in the thick of it?
Well, when I visited the Holy Land, we had the opportunity, oh man, talk about crying. We had the opportunity to visit the 12 stations of the cross, and they were the stops that Jesus took on his way to Calvary. And just the opportunity to walk in the agony and the pain and the confusion and the lack of trust and the mad at God human experiences that Jesus had on that journey, it affirmed my human experiences that God gave me and that I was entitled to all of them, and yet God.
Wow. I'm left rather speechless, but I'm gonna give it a whirl. I would just say that in looking at Easter, I'm reminding that Jesus bore all our sins on that cross. And when he rose with resurrection power, and by his stripes we are healed. And that's what I would just say. Just remember that Jesus bore it all and he rose. And in him being risen again, that our healing is there for those of us that, are of the faith.
I'll jump in and say that, when scripture says there's no weapon formed against you that'll prosper, it never said that it wouldn't be a weapon formed.
Right.
It just said it wouldn't prosper. Right. And
Right,
so
that's right.
sitting in that space of there is something that's happening in your life, in your body. There is something that you perceive as a weapon that's been formed against you, knowing that it can't prosper and looking for the places where you can prosper in spite of it. It is the journey. That is the path. The only way through is through.
Oh, that there's through, yeah. I say, be still and know he is God.
That's right.
Be still that Friday, like sit through it for a minute and you will rise.
Yeah.
You will rise. Just be still and do the work.
That's right. God loves us all. He loves us all. That's what I say.
There it is. Woo-wee.
Thank you guys. I love you so much.
Okay.
Dude,
I love you too. I always have such a good
So
time.
beautiful.
I'm so honored and blessed every time I come. So thank you,
I
ladies.
wear my Tammy earrings.
Shout out to Ebony London, a Black
Okay.
artist, ebonylondon.com, who
Let's
makes
put her in the
these
chat.
breast cancer earrings exclusively for Carrie's Touch.
I
Oh,
love
Right
you.
on.
we'll put your websites in the chat on Facebook.
Yeah.
We want people to traffic your sites, to seek you out for advice, for wisdom, for resources, for participation in your trials and
Yeah.
studies.
Yeah.
And as always, you can find Ricky in touch at BBCA, and she
Yeah.
can direct you to any resource. that
Anybody.
If you don't know where to get started and you don't know which end is up, let me tell you something. These sisters on this show will get you right.
We will. We'll get it. We'll get it. We'll make it happen. We don't know it. I will call whoever we need to call. So
Yeah. It's true. We hope this has been relatable and reliable and real. That's what we set out to do every Wednesday night here on blackdoctor.org on their Facebook page. And we're so thankful for the opportunity to do it. Thanks to our sponsors, and the doctor's in.
the doctor's in. The doctor's in.
And-
Freshty love. Freshty love. See you guys. Thank you. Happy Easter.
Love you guys.
Love you.
So
Bless
much. Bless you.